don't shop for anything on Capitol Street. Let's let the merchants down on Capitol Street feel the economic pinch. Let me say this to you. I had one merchant to call me, and he said, I want you to know that I've talked to my national office today, and they want me to tell you that we don't need nigger business. These are stores that help to support the White Citizens Council, the council that is dedicated to keeping you and I second-class citizens. Now, finally, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be demonstrating here until freedom comes to Negroes here in Jackson, Mississippi.
15 minutes past midnight, Evers got out of his car beside his home in a Negro residential area. In a vacant lot about 40 yards away, a sniper fired a single shot from a high-powered rifle at Evers' silhouette. The bullet hit him in the back, crashed through his body, through a window into the house. He died within an hour at a Jackson hospital. City detectives believe the fatal shot was fired from this sweet gum tree. They have found a rifle in the bushes which they think is the murder weapon. They say they also have other clues.
As a child, I remember vividly my mother talking about Medgar Evers. And she would always tell us it's extremely important that you know who this person was, that you know what he did. And she was always dismayed that nobody had really written about him, or he had really gotten the kind of respect that she thought he deserved. Unlike Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and others, that she didn't feel that he really got that kind of recognition. He was born, of course, in Decatur, Mississippi, but it's very important to understand the significance of his family, his mother and father in particular, because they were teaching him that it was his responsibility to not only care for the community at large, but his responsibility to the larger community. And so he grew up with this kind of attitude. His father, James Evers, was very much protective of the family, a person who talked about the importance of manhood and their responsibilities as men. And so he grew up with that. His mother as well taught them the brotherhood of all men, and it's particular for them that their responsibilities also. And so he grew up with these kinds of ideas. It's important to note that his childhood too, he was oftentimes faced with brutal racism in terms of individuals who he knew who had been lynched and what that meant for him. And so the childhood for him was a growing experience. But out of that came this idea that you have a personal responsibility, and that's what's important, I believe. In the 1950s and 1960s, Mississippi was very oppressive and violent in terms of African Americans and their position and status in the society at large. We're talking about second-class citizenship. We're talking about individuals who denied opportunities to vote, denied opportunities for equal access to education, denied opportunities to participate fully within the society. So it was oppressive, to say the least. But most important to that, for understanding the kind of environment, is that it was a very violent time. And so individuals who decided they wanted to register to vote, and at times could be killed or beaten at a moment's notice. And this was not just connected to the right to vote. Any person who exhibited any kind of attempt at demonstrating their manhood or womanhood was subjected to either lynchings or beatings or brutality, those kinds of things. So that was the environment in which individuals were acting upon. That becomes important for understanding not only what Medgar Evers was doing, but also for those individuals who were also activists along with him as well, because you're acting against a society that in many instances will kill you. And that's the kind of environment that we were talking about. Individuals also would lose their jobs, if they were identified as individuals who was trying to change the system. They may have loans that would be suddenly called due. So these are the kinds of things that will go on. Their employers would be notified of their participation, those kinds of things. So it's really kind of an oppressive environment in the 1950s and 1960s when Evers is operating. He decided in 1953, while he was at a Regional Council of Negro Leadership meeting in which they were calling for volunteers to desegregate the law school at the University of Mississippi. And he decided then that he would volunteer to do that in 53 and actually put forth his application in 1954. The importance of this is Evers believed that African Americans should have an opportunity, just like everybody else, not only to go to school, but also to participate in all aspects of the society in which they lived. Now, he put his application in January of 1954. It would go through the process, but in the end, of course, he'd be denied on the technicality in which they would say that he hadn't got the proper support from where he had lived originally. And so he would be denied. Even though they said that we would open it up again for consideration, nothing ever came of it. The important part of that, however, is the NAACP was paying very close attention to his application at that point as well, because this is a period in which the NAACP is really focused upon trying to integrate institutions on the professional or the graduate level. And so once he was denied, they actually offered the NAACP field secretary position to him. And so the NAACP became this vehicle for which he then could express himself fully. The NAACP field secretary was responsible for organizing NAACP chapters, was responsible for investigating all instances of brutality and wrongdoing throughout the state. The field secretary also was responsible for making reports of any kind of problems and issues and sending that to the national office in New York for publication as well. And so the field secretary position was not just something that was localized in an office, but more so, they went all out of state, speaking to groups of individuals, encouraging individuals to register to vote, encouraging lawsuits, filing affidavits, showing individuals how to register, and organizing. And so the field secretary's responsibility was immense and massive, and it covered the entire state. Definitely for Medgar Evers, one of the more significant ones happened with the 1955 lynching of 14-year-old Emmitt Till, in which his responsibility at that time was to investigate what had happened, to try to seek out witnesses, and then try to get justice for the Till family. And it was many instances of that. That was something that really kind of bothered him also, because we have a 14-year-old child who was brutally murdered. And these kind of things replicated themselves as well. In 1955, you had several murders in George Lee in Belzoni, Mississippi, Miss Lamar Smith in Brookhaven, Mississippi. And again, Evers was responsible for investigating those and then trying to get justice. And so with that, you have to go in and oftentimes in disguise to try to figure out what had happened, to try to speak to individuals who may have witnessed it, get a sense of what had gone on, and then try to fill out affidavits and things of that nature. And most importantly, to get the word out to the NAACP headquarters in New York, so they also could publicize what is going on. And so these were some of the more prominent things that Evers were involved in. I think it's important to understand when we're talking about Medgar Evers and civil rights activism that every day that the individuals get up and leave the house, this is the mentality that we have to think of today, that they understood full well that they may not come back home again. And when they leave their families and kiss them in the morning, that may be the last time that they see them. But yet they still do it day in and day out. And for the field secretary, that's something that he's constantly in that kind of fire, that kind of environment. It will become much more difficult for Evers after he gives his national or this televised address in 1963, because prior to that, he has to go in many instances, undercover. If you're dealing with sharecroppers, you have to go in dressed as a sharecropper. You have to go in the middle of the night where you can talk to people where they can't be seen by whites in the area. And so it's very, very difficult. After he gives his televised address, then pretty much everybody knows what he looks like. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to go incognito or undercover in that respects. So it was always difficult and it was always trying, but Evers understood that going in. And he would often talk about the fact that even if he was killed in the process, that would be worth it if it changed the way things were. Right? And that's the kind of mentality of the person that we're talking about here. And so when you start looking at the environment, when you start looking at what people are faced with, as field secretary, your job is to go in the heart of all that. And then on top of that, you're being monitored by organizations whether it's the White Citizens Council or the Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission. They're also keeping an eye on everything that you're doing, everything that you're saying as much as they can. And then they have these immense files that they keep on you also. The assassination occurred during the early morning hours of June 12th. This is June 11th, of course. Kennedy had gave his presidential address dealing with civil rights issues, and Evers had been watching that. He gets home a little after 12, after leaving a meeting, NAACP meeting as well. And so he gets home a little after 12. He gets out of his car and he decides what he's going to bring in. And he decides that he's going to bring in the house some T-shirts with the words "Jim Crow must go," printed across them, that the NAACP had earlier. And as he gets out of his car, he's shot in the back. And his family, of course, is awake because they're waiting on him to get home. And they hear him pull up. And then they also hear the shot. And when he's hit with the bullet, I mean, and this is a devastating shot, but he's strong enough to, when his wife opens the door, she see that he's crawled pretty much, and it happens right out his side in the carport. He's crawled pretty much to the door as if he's trying to come home, as she remembers. And then, of course, the neighbors hear the shots that are going on, and people come out, and they see him in this state, including his wife and children. And so this is a very emotional time because people understand now the severity of what had just happened. Here's an individual who had done nothing but work toward the advancement of African Americans and to bring justice to the state, and then he's shot in the back this way. And so it also kind of rejuvenates the movement too, his assassination, as people now come together to try to bring about positive changes to all this. But the assassination is what really, I guess, kind of places this really kind of into focus in terms of the severity of what is going on here. There was a sense of, I guess when I say bittersweet, I mean that people are happy that, or at least relieved now, that that part of it was closed, and that the individual who had actually murdered Medgar Evers had been found guilty. But at the same time, you understand that this person had lived his life, you know, a long life. He was an old man by the time he was convicted. And so he had an opportunity to see his family. He had opportunities to enjoy himself and those kinds of things that were denied Evers. And so when I said bittersweet, that's what I mean. You have this kind of closure part. The person is found guilty, but then the person that had did the most to try to change society for the best, his life had been cut short and his family had been denied that. But more importantly, the state and the nation had been denied what he could have done with the rest of his life. And so you had those kind of counterweights to it. But overall, people are quite happy that justice had finally been served, at least that point. What I really wanted to do with the book was to not only talk about the life of Medgar Evers, but to situate him in the larger civil rights discussion. I wanted to understand who he was and understand how he did the kind of work he did. Because I didn't want to just tell the story of an individual. I want to tell the story of a man and what civil rights struggle actually meant on a personal, familiar, professional level as well. I think his impact is he really demonstrated the humanity and the humanness of civil rights struggle and the humanness of what it means to be a person living in society at whatever time and space you're in, and what your responsibilities and roles are. And so I think by looking at the life of Medgar Evers, you really see that in great and vivid detail, even though he was an individual who was very much low key. What he did spoke volumes, and people are still hearing that message today.